Hello everyone, my name's Nathan, and today we're going to be taking a look at Banners of Ruin, a new deck building game coming out onto Steam Early Access today. So let's jump right into it and have a look at what's good, what's bad, and whether or not it's worth your money. So, Banners of Ruin is a single player deck builder very much in the style of games like Slay the Spire. This one will see you progress through a dark and gritty world inhabited by medieval warrior bears, wolves, weasels, mice and hares, building your deck, hiring new party members, and gathering equipment as you go. And for someone like me who honestly couldn't get enough of Slay the Spire, this gameplay is really satisfying. And Banners of Ruin does progress the concept, adding its own twist to the combat which feels very different, thanks to the up to 6 party members you can have at any one time, each with different weapons and unique abilities to keep things interesting. The way combat works is that you get a new hand of cards each turn for your entire party, and then you decide which character is going to use which card. These cards have a stamina cost, displayed in yellow, and some of the more powerful cards have a will cost, displayed in blue. Stamina regenerates every turn, but will doesn't, meaning you'll have to be careful about using some of your stronger abilities. There are some cards that can only be used by a specific character, but for the most part your cards are available for whoever you want to use them. Enemy intents for the next turn will be displayed under them, and who they're going to attack can be found out by hovering over them. And are you getting the Slay the Spire vibes yet? Because you probably should be. Especially with effects like poison that can be set on enemies and ticks down each turn. Where the game does significantly differ though, is in movement. Some of the cards in the game allow your characters to change position, and this can be incredibly useful, allowing your characters to move out of the way of enemy attacks, which can be fully dodged and evaded, meaning you take no damage whatsoever. It also opens up the opportunity for the game to introduce interesting cards that perform better or worse depending on where a certain character is positioned. Kind of like a Darkest Dungeon system, although nowhere near as deep. But it really does add a lot to the tactics of the combat. One issue I had here though is that as far as I can tell, there's no way to organise your party's positioning before combat. So say if you've got a character who's particularly tanky, and you want to throw him into the front line to take all the hits. It seems as though there's no way to make that happen from the start of a fight. There's a chance I'm missing something here because to me this seems like a very basic feature, and if it isn't in the game, it definitely needs adding. And one other thing that I would like to see improved here is that while the art style is absolutely beautiful and really appeals to me, the animations are virtually non-existent, with your main characters having some pretty basic sword swings and stabs, and enemies basically having no animations at all. Overall though, the combat system is pretty solid, and it does feel significantly different from similar games, while offering good strategic gameplay. And when you win a combat, you'll be rewarded with florins, which can be used to purchase new cards or hire new party members, a choice of cards, from which you can add one to your deck, and occasionally new equipment, which can give your character better armor or new weapons, although these are far more commonly found in decisions made in the overworld. The equipment system is a decent enough addition for character progression, but it needs an awful lot of fleshing out. Not so much on the weapons side, as new weapons add cards to your deck which each have different effects, making that choice an interesting one. But on the armor side of things, there's a lack of any meaningful choice for the most part, as the most common armor types that you'll come across are some variation of light, medium and heavy, and the difference between them is merely the amount of block that they give a character at the start of each combat. For example, light armor gives 6 block, while heavy armor gives 24 block. And that's it. There's no more stat differences or effects on those pieces of armor, no real choice to be made. The higher number is just flat out better, and you're always going to want to go with the higher number. Now there are a few sets of armor that you can find that do have some interesting mechanics, like the Survivalist's gear, which also replenishes a character's health, but for the most part these armor types are rare, and which armor gives the most block will be your only consideration when picking 90% of the time. Alongside equipment, characters will also level up, by completing combats as well as by completing certain events. When a character levels up, they gain either a stamina point or a will point, and you can choose which you want. And they also gain either a new card for your deck or a passive ability depending on their level. And those passive abilities are really interesting to me, as they add a real sense of character progression and growth in the overall strength of your party. And the passive effects on offer are actually quite interesting too, with options like Bloodthirsty, that gives a character more max HP every time they kill an enemy. Now, I've always been a massive fan of character progression in games, and being able to see your characters get stronger. I mean, hell, when I'm playing XCOM, my main concern is leveling up my soldiers, and if one of them dies, I actually care about it because they were so powerful. And Banners of Ruin has that same effect, because if one of your party dies, you lose all of their abilities and a lot of the power that you'd built up. So the way that progression is done in Banners of Ruin is really satisfying, and for me, it offered a way to become attached to these characters that I'd only spent a couple of hours with. Personally, this system of leveling up is actually more interesting to me than the relics system in Slay the Spire, though I would like to see more passives added into the game. There's already quite a few, but we could always do with more. Especially as I've had a couple of runs where 2 or 3 of my characters have had the same passive ability. So with combat and equipment discussed, what about the overworld element of the game? Well, every time you move forward, you'll be presented with 3 cards that give you choices on how to advance. These can be, for example, drunk guards that you can fight or steal money off of, merchants that you can buy new cards from, or just basic combats. And while for the most part you'll have choices going forwards, there are quite a few occasions in the game where all 3 options are the same, and you'll be forced to do what the game wants you to do. This system is fine, but nowhere near as in-depth as other similar games, as there's no real way to plan forward. You never really know what's coming up next, and therefore you can't decide to take a certain path as it leads to the most beneficial outcome. Now, this mystery can be interesting, but it takes away from some of the strategy involved in this part of the game. And more disappointingly for me, most of the events that you come across are pretty damn boring. There's no element of luck or RNG attached to them, so you always know the outcome of each card. And personally, I'd have loved to have seen some of these events have mini-games attached to them, like we've seen in games like Hand of Fate. Just something other than a block of text and an outcome. Granted, this is in no way the main component of the game, but in its current state it's just not that interesting, and led to me looking to take combat opportunities as often as possible, because that's where the fun lies. Now, I mentioned merchants a little while ago and the ability to buy cards, and one of the most important aspects of a deck builder is how interesting and how fun are the cards. And I'm pleased to report here, they're pretty good. There's a decent amount of different status effects from poison to bleeding to charge, which can all be applied through cards. And that positioning system we mentioned earlier allows for cards that target whole ranks or whole lanes of enemies. The will system too means that very powerful cards can be added into the game, but not overused, as you'll likely only be able to use them a couple of times each fight. For example, I had a card called Miasma, which added 1 poison to a random enemy every time I drew a card, which is just massively powerful. But thanks to the fact that it cost will, I could only play it a couple of times a fight, which kept things fairly well balanced. Fairly. Now, don't worry here, because while this stops some of the insanely overpowered combinations you might find, there's actually still plenty of crazy powerful plays that you can make, and plenty of opportunities to take out your enemies in interesting ways. I do, however, feel that more crazy and fun cards should be added into the game, and deck specialization is actually quite difficult here. Putting together, for example, a poison build won't be all that easy, and some of the synergy you might find in other games just isn't here. So for me, what we've got at the moment should be more of a solid base rather than a finished choice of cards. There is an unlock system which will allow you access to more cards, but even more should definitely be added. Now, one of the things that's irked me about Banners of Ruin so far is that it has such an interesting world design, but seems to hide its story. The dark and dingy nature of the world is somewhat spoiled by basic questions such as, who are we, what's going on, and what's our goal here? The game does give you a text box describing some of it early on, but really? This is all you're giving us? You've created this whole intriguing world and 2 sentences. Sure. And while you can decipher some more of the story from the Steam store page and the developer's website, the game itself seems intent on hiding it. And to me that's such a shame, because Banners of Ruin appears to have an interesting story to tell, and that extra added context could go a long way in a game like this, and could add more character to your fighters over just the beautiful art style. Now you don't have to have this story every time, especially as Banners of Ruin is designed to be a highly replayable game, and asking players to sit through the same story over and over would be a bore. But if they just add a little tick box when starting a game, like they do with the tutorial that simply says, play the story yes or no, and then the players have the choice to turn it off if they choose. Having some context to what we're doing here would go a long way for me. So finally then, before we finish up here, I just want to quickly mention a few minor issues that I've had with the game. And once again, this is in early access, so I'd love to see these changed. Firstly, once you've selected a card, that's it. You will be playing that card. There's no option to deselect and go back if you've thought of a better way, or simply just misclicked, like I've done a few times. And for me, this needs changing. Of course, once you've done the damage or received the benefit of the card, you shouldn't be able to go back. But before any of that's happened, I would like the chance to change my mind. Second, merchants suck. They really suck at the moment. The choice between only 4 cards, and no option to sell a card to them, thus removing an unwanted card from your deck, means that for the most part, not visiting a merchant is basically just as good as visiting them. Occasionally you'll get a nice card, but mostly merchants are kind of pointless. And finally, the game actually seems a little bit easy in its current state. I mean, sure, on my first run I got absolutely thwapped fairly early on because I didn't really know what I was doing. But in my second playthrough, I actually won. And when I compare that to how many times it took me to get a successful run on Slay the Spire, the second playthrough seems ridiculously fast. Granted, there was some luck in that, and I did end up losing one of my characters. But once I understood the mechanics of the game, most combats didn't feel too difficult. Even ones that appeared to be very tricky when the enemies appeared on screen and had loads of health, loads of block. It didn't end up being as tough as it looked. It's by no means an easy game that you'll waltz right through, but I feel a tiny bit more difficulty would add to the fun. So then, conclusions time. Is Banners of Ruin good, and does it deserve your time and your money? As a whole, yes. This one is a lot of fun and offers interesting combat that adds its own compelling twist to the mechanics of other great games. Sure, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made, and whether or not you're willing to invest in this one while it's still in early access is entirely a decision for you to make. But what we already have here is a solid deck builder that offers a lot of replayability and a charming aesthetic. And I can safely say that once I've done editing and uploading this video, I'm going to go back and play some more. Now, one of the problems with recording this video before the release of the game into early access is that I don't currently have pricing information for Banners of Ruin, and I sent my query email about the price a little bit late and haven't got a reply yet. Totally understandable, entirely my fault. Where I'd hope this one gets priced is at maximum around £10 to £15, or maybe $15. That seems about right for me, and to be honest, if anything, I'd like to see it a little bit cheaper in its current state. So that's about it for today, but if you'd like to see Banners of Ruin played, I do have a little Let's Play out on the Less Than Optimal channel, and I'd love to see you over there. I also want to hear your opinions on this one in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video or found it at all helpful, I'd be very appreciative if you'd click the like button, and subscribe for more like this if you haven't already. Anyway, I've been Nathan, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.